The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For Arizona Public Media, I'm Erika Hamden, professor of astrophysics at the University of Arizona, and this is Arizona Science. Joining me today is Maya Kaelberer, professor of physiology at the College of Medicine at the University of Arizona. Maya conducts research that explores the connection between the brain and the gut. How do your gut bacteria figure out and respond to what you actually eat? So welcome, Maya.
Thanks for having me here.
So Maya, can you tell us a little bit about your research into gut bacteria and why they matter and what your brain is doing?
Of course. So our gut bacteria are kind of like our friends that travel with us always. And so how it is that they're affecting how we feel or what it is that we want to eat has been an outstanding question. And so what I wanted to look at is whether or not we had a sense that allowed us to communicate bidirectionally with our gut microbes.
So is that I eat something and then I don't feel full and I'm like, oh, I want to eat more? Is that the sense that they are feeding into?
Yeah, just on a really basic level. So what we found is that there's this signal that these microbes can release. And when they release this, it signals to the host that the microbes have had enough or that their numbers are good. But it allows the animal to then stop eating, or it allows you to say, okay, I'm not sensing the signal, therefore I should stop eating. Or if, say, the microbes want more food, they can release this signal, and then that signals to the host, hey, I should eat a little bit more. Maybe my microbes need a little bit more nutrition.
And so this is something that is present in all animals, not just humans. This is a kind of signal chain that is true across species.
So we think that it's true across species. My work is basic research, so I do work with animal models instead of directly working with humans.
And then the types of signals or the types of food, because we eat eggs or you can eat a salad or you can eat pizza, or is it just the total caloric volume? Are there certain vitamins?
Yeah, so this is a great question because your microbes are living in your colon. So this is at the end of your gut. And by then you're just in your basic micronutrient breakdown.
Okay.
And so there are a couple of things that microbes really care about. Sugar and fat are two big things that they like to eat, and they metabolize this. These are mostly the signals that they're getting their food from. But the signal that I'm talking about is actually kind of interesting because when you start eating, this is when the signal is released. So there are mechanisms that allow the microbes to know food is coming and then communicate to the host. Even before the food gets to the colon.
Okay. And is there a difference in the type of bacteria that responds to the sugars versus the type of bacteria that responds to fat, for example?
Yeah, there are many microbial species that live within your gut. Some of them prefer certain nutrients to others. They change based on who their neighbors happen to be, so the whole community as a whole would respond to food in different ways. And so what we were looking at initially was just, is there a global signal that's just telling you how are the microbes doing?
So as an elder millennial, I remember a bunch of different types of fat that were meant to not be digested, or types of sugar that don't react with your body the way that normal sugar does. So if you eat them, how do our gut bacteria actually react? Or can they tell that it's a fake?
I'm glad you brought that up because it's this really interesting thing. You've probably heard of the term leaky gut, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
We all have. So leaky gut is when the gut barrier breaks down a little bit. And it used to be that what you could do is you could take sucralose, which is an artificial sweetener, and you have a person ingest it, and then sucralose doesn't get absorbed. So it just goes straight through the body, which means if you have a leaky gut, there's more sucralose in your blood. So this became a measurement of how leaky your gut was. So the microbes generally don't care about artificial sweeteners, specifically sucralose. And this really interesting thing happened. I believe this was discovered in Switzerland. Somebody who was studying the wastewater was measuring artificial sweetener content in the waste because, of course, that's a measurement of what people are consuming and what ends up there.
Yeah.
And they realized a few years ago that there's no more artificial sweetener in the wastewater. And it does not mean that people stopped consuming it. It means the microbes have now evolved to metabolize artificial sweetener. So now the question becomes, these artificial sweeteners, they used to be non-caloric.
And are they still?
Right. If the microbes metabolize it and they metabolize it into something that we can consume or get calories from, now suddenly they're not going to be non-caloric. Right?
Oh, wow. So I want to shift the topic a little bit. You have the bacteria, which are actually consuming certain things and sending signals out. And then you have I assume, the human side, which is actually getting those signals. And
Yeah.
so how do those two parts kind of interact? And are there like long-term effects if the bacteria change or evolve? Then what happens on the receiver side?
This is a massively complex field, right? Because there are different ways. What I discovered was that there's this direct way of our gut epithelial cell. We call them neuropod cells. These are the cells I care about. They transduce nutrients and bacterial signals. And they synaptically connect to neurons. So they can really precisely and rapidly communicate what's going on to the nervous system and then to the brain. That's one pathway that signaling can happen. And that signaling is fast and it's specific and it can affect real-time behavior. But then you also have the metabolites, and the metabolites can get absorbed into your bloodstream, and now they can go all over the place and have these effects that are more global and more long-term.
Okay. And that's a totally different kind of signaling path.
It's a different signaling path. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You had a paper in Nature, and in the paper, if I interpreted correctly, you talked about how the neuropods can be inherited for mice which were fed a very sugary diet, and then like future mice would be happy to eat sugar even eating their regular amounts. And so is this something where like the amount of food that you or like Maya or me, Erika, want to eat is dependent on like what our grandparents ate?
Yeah, so I think that some of this is true, but we also have this ability to shift, right? So I never like to say like it's set in stone and you'll never be able to change it. So these neuropod cells, what we've discovered is that they do turn over every about a month. So every month you get new neuropod cells that are born. This is actually the similar timeline to your taste receptor cells in your tongue and your olfactory receptor cells in your nose, as well as like actually your Merkel cells in the skin. These are all these transduction cells. So it's on par with some of these other sensory systems. So it allows us a couple of things. One, it allows us stability. So over that month, you have that same sense. But two, it also allows us the ability to shift depending on what our environment is.
Okay. So you're not like stuck with neuropod cells that were helpful when you lived in a rainforest and now you're in a desert and you need something else.
Exactly. And this is actually something that like I love to like take my science and think about, well, how does this affect me in my everyday life? So sometimes I get in the habit, I'll eat a lot of like junk food and I'm like going out to eat a lot and I'm like, oh, I'm at the airport. Yeah, I'll just go get that fast food. It'll be fine. And the more I eat it, the more I crave it, the more I want it. And then at some point I'm like, all right, enough is enough. And then I stop and I make food and I make sure I have a lot of vegetables and meats and I can feel the shift. It takes a while. It takes maybe like about 2 weeks, maybe sometimes 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. But then suddenly I don't crave that junk food anymore. And so I think that this is an indication of how it is our sensory system can adapt if you like maintain that habit.
Are there situations where someone could say like, okay, my microbiome is really not working out for me. Maybe what I need to do is train it in some other direction and kind of overcome those past habits?
Your immune system works in all these ways. And like we know that our immune system is working because we get the fever and then that's just what needs to happen in order for us to get over the infection. Our sensory systems work that way too. So at some point, like, yeah, it's not going to be fun. You got to like force yourself. But then once you get over that hump, suddenly it becomes easier and easier. And that's the whole thing about these habit formings. The more we learn about the specific species that are great and how they interact with each other, because we're still just learning that stuff.
The species of different bacteria.
Yeah. The species of these different bacteria. The more we learn about that, then the more we can actually tailor your diet to like what your microbiome is at now and say like, okay, you've got this kind of composition. Now we're going to feed it these certain foods to get you to shift a little bit into this area, and then that's going to help you kind of maintain a healthy diet.
So taking a step back, I'm really curious to just hear about, like, how did you get into this?
So I would always describe myself as a sensory neurobiologist. So I'm really interested in sensory neurobiology, which is the ability to take the physical world, how do we sense it, and then how does the nervous system initially filter those signals, because our senses aren't there to tell us exactly what is in the world. Our senses are there to tell us what is going to help us survive.
So you kind of got into this like very specific work on the gut bacteria kind of from this bigger picture of how your body sends these signals that aren't just like what we think of as the typical 5 senses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the gut, to me, it's kind of, for a sensory neurobiologist, it's super cool because we know very little about how these fast signals are being sent. So it's an opportunity for me to be like, okay, what does this mean? Like, what am I feeling? How can I bring together multiple disciplines?
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Maya. It's going to be very exciting to see how your work develops and eventually makes people's lives better. This is Erika Hamden, and you've been listening to Arizona Science. We've been talking with Maya Kaelberer, who is working on the connection between gut bacteria and diet. You can hear more of this conversation and others on our Arizona Science segments by going to azpm.org.
This has been an original production of AZPM News.